I came across Big Fork Brands recently, and it's become one of those finds you actually want to tell people about, and you don't find that often. Okay. They're doing bacon sausage, plus these really solid pork jerky snacks and Chicago style sauces. Basically, upgrade anything you throw them on burgers, hot dogs, fries, throw it on there. It works.
But I bet it's packed full of junk.
Actually, it's made with clean ingredients and real care. That's small batch with no shortcuts, and people are obsessed with the flavor. You can go over to bigforkbrands.com, use our code INFOGO at checkout, and get 20% off anything on the site.
You can find the link and our code in the show notes. Welcome to the podcast. I'm William,
And I'm Kat,
and that makes this Info on the Go.
feeding your curiosity wherever you go.
I've always wondered, you know, why do we have presidential libraries? And what's actually inside of them? Like, is it their books or, like, is it going to be like a bunch of books, something that influenced them? Like, I don't know. I never stopped to give it much thought, and then boom.
I don't know, the movie National Treasure with Nicolas Cage had me questioning it.
Yeah, so I guess I'll just try to set this one up. Why are presidential libraries always so quiet? Because even the books are afraid of getting executive ordered to shut up. Sorry, I had to start off with a dead joke. All right, but here we go. Imagine stepping into a quiet, sunlit room filled with shelves that stretch from floor to ceiling. Each one of them is crammed with boxes, folders, files, all containing the most intimate details of a president's life. Notes that they scribbled, letters, from world leaders to world leaders, even the doodles that they made during tense cabinet meetings.
Now imagine uncovering a document that was thought to be lost for decades. A handwritten memo from Franklin D. Roosevelt outlining early plans for Social Security, or a secret letter from Richard Nixon hinting at political maneuvers that would later shape history.
And these moments aren't just about dusty papers, they're about power, memory, and the stories we tell ourselves about leadership. Presidential libraries are designed to preserve this history, but they are more than archival warehouses, if you will.
They are curated spaces where legacy is shaped, sometimes celebrated, sometimes sanitized, and very often contested. As we walk through these institutions, we have to ask ourselves, are we seeing the full story or only what someone wants us to see?
So, who decides which documents, which photographs, what artifacts belong on display, and which ones should be locked away? So, Kat and I are going to step behind the museum walls into the archives and hallways of America's presidential libraries to explore not only the history that they hold, but also the controversies that they sometimes spark, the narratives they shape, and the enduring question: how do we remember our leaders, and who gets to write that memory? That I think those are going to be some pretty big questions.
The story of presidential libraries begins not with grand ceremonies or sprawling museums, but with one president quietly trying to preserve his own papers, which was Herbert Hoover. In the years after leaving office, he became the first former president to donate his personal records to the public, setting a precedent that would evolve into the official presidential library system.
But it wasn't until Franklin Delano Roosevelt, or FDR, in 1939 that the idea was formalized with federal support, creating the first official presidential library in Hyde Park, New York. Roosevelt's vision was revolutionary. Instead of storing documents in private homes or government basements, he wanted a dedicated space where scholars, historians, and citizens could access the papers of his administration, from letters to policy drafts to, well, personal reflections. And over the decades, the system expanded with each new presidency, from Truman and Eisenhower to modern leaders like Clinton and Bush, growing not only in size, but in ambition.
These libraries became more than storage facilities. They were monuments to legacy, carefully designed to present a president's story to the world. Yet, from the beginning, questions lingered. Who decides which documents are preserved, which stories are told, and which moments are left out? As we trace the evolution of these libraries, we see a delicate balance between history and memory, scholarship and spectacle, revealing as much about the nation as about the men who occupied the Oval Office,
And maybe someday women.
and maybe someday women.
Okay. I went to a presidential library expecting a lot of action, but it turns out it's just a bunch of books sitting around waiting for term limits to expire. All right. Anyway, if you step inside any presidential library, you'll quickly realize it's more than just a collection of papers. It's a carefully constructed world where history, politics, and personal story collide. At the heart of each of these presidential libraries are the archives, tens of thousands, sometimes millions of documents from policy drafts and correspondence with world leaders to private letters and memos that were never meant for public eyes.
These materials offer historians a rare glimpse into decision making at the highest levels, revealing both the triumphs and the missteps of presidency. But presidential libraries are also museums designed to engage the public. Visitors can walk through life size replicas of Oval Office rooms, see personal artifacts like Abraham Lincoln's top hat or Ronald Reagan's cowboy boots, and explore multimedia exhibits that bring moments in history to life. Yet behind the scenes, the work of archivists is meticulous and often painstaking, sorting, preserving, digitizing, and sometimes restricting access to sensitive records.
Mm. And each one of these presidential libraries has its own personality. Some emphasize on scholarship, like the FDR Library in Hyde Park, while others, like the modern George W. Bush Library, embrace technology to make documents and exhibits interactive for a new generation. And through it all, a subtle question lingers. How much of what we see is curated for history, and how much is curated for legacy? Every display, every highlighted document, every story told in these spaces reflects choices, choices that shape how we remember presidents and, by extension, the nation itself.
Presidential libraries are meant to be temples of history. But behind the polished exhibits and climate controlled archives, controversy often simmers.
Before we get into that controversy, I say we should take a small break.
Okay,
That's what you call a cliffhanger, right?
yes.
Okay, we'll be right back.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Have you thought about what you're getting your mom for Mother's Day? At Cozy Earth, they have a full line of apparel PJs, shirts, socks, you name it, they have it. And if you buy any of their bedding, they have a 100-night sleep trial and a 10-year warranty, free shipping on orders over $50 or more. And our listeners get an exclusive discount of 21% off just by using our code INFOGO at checkout. And you can do that at cozyearth.com. Find the link and the code in the show notes. If you're laying mulch, bedding animals, covering seeds, or just want your property looking right, there's one name you need to know. Irwin Farms, Middle Georgia's #1 wheat straw provider. When it comes to quality wheat straw, it matters. Clean, consistent, and ready to work because they don't cut corners, they bell it. Whether you're a homeowner, gardener, farmer, or you're just getting your hands dirty for the first time, they've got you covered. You can find a link in the show notes. Just Google Middle Georgia's #1 wheat straw provider. Either way, you'll find Irwin Farms.
Now that we're back, from the very beginning, questions have surrounded who decides what is preserved and what is hidden. Critics argue that these libraries are not just repositories of history, they are instruments of legacy management, carefully curated to present presidents to the best possible light.
Hmm. Take, for example, the Nixon Presidential Library, which opened in 1990, and amid lingering distrust over, well, Watergate, it was initially controlled by the Nixon family, who had significant influence over how the documents were presented. It wasn't until 2007 that his library became federally managed, giving scholars greater access to previously restricted files, including those infamous White House tapes.
Now, this raises a critical question. When private interests intersect with public history, how much of the story is being filtered, polished, or even omitted? Controversies aren't limited to the Watergate era secrets.
No, because modern libraries such as the George W. Bush's and Bill Clinton's have faced criticism over their portrayal of contentious policies. From the Iraq War to healthcare reform, exhibits sometimes emphasize triumphs while glossing over the missteps or, the public backlash. Even older ones are not immune to this. Some historians have noted that FDR's in Hyde Park, while groundbreaking for access, well, it really downplayed certain failures of the New Deal and avoided deeply critical assessments of Roosevelt's decisions during World War II.
These specific choices reflect an inherent tension. Libraries are funded partly through private donations, which often from political allies or supporters, which can subtly influence how history is told. Then there are the legal and ethical questions surrounding document access. Presidential libraries are bound by the Presidential Records Act of 1978, which mandates public access to presidential papers, but restrictions are allowed for national security, privacy, or political sensitivity.
Well, I mean, I get that. There's some stuff that has to be kept from the public. But, controversy, like I think that's kind of where we're talking about here, like the scandals, the stuff that they're trying to hide.
Right.
Like, I guess being private, they can kind of like say, yeah, we're gonna scrub this little spot off of this. Anyway, this has created a patchwork of access where some records remain sealed for decades, frustrating researchers and sometimes sparking lawsuits. A notable example occurred with the Reagan Library when critics argued that certain Cold War communications and armed negotiation documents were heavily redacted or delayed in release, shaping public perception of his administration for years.
Controversy also extends to the physical presentation of history. Libraries are as much museums as archives, and exhibits can subtly or not so subtly frame narratives. Ronald Reagan's exhibits, for instance, emphasize his optimism and charisma, sometimes minimizing the complexities of policy debates or social consequences of his administration's decisions.
And then you have Clinton's library, which includes interactive exhibits showcasing his economic policies and global initiatives. But critics note that it downplays scandals like, well, Monica Lewinsky, shaping a visitor's understanding of his legacy through selective storytelling. These choices really raise questions about the line between education and influence. Are these presidential libraries teaching history, or are they just trying to shape your memory?
Yet, controversy isn't always about bias or omission. Some of the most intriguing disputes have been human in scale. Archivists, historians, and families of presidents clashing over interpretation. A library might restrict access to a set of documents not for secrecy, but because scholars interpret their context differently, fearing misinterpretation.
Even donors can weigh in, advocating for a certain narrative, funding exhibits that align with their view of, well, the president's legacy. Every decision, every redaction, every curated display becomes a reflection not just of history, but of power. Who holds it, who writes it, and who decides? In short, they exist at the crossroads between scholarship, politics, and storytelling. They offer unparalleled access to raw materials of history. Yet every step of their creation, preservation, and presentation, Well, it all carries influence.
As visitors walk through the halls, they're not only observing artifacts, they're stepping into a space shaped by debate, by disagreement, and by the persistent tension between truth and narrative. By understanding these controversies, we can appreciate that history is never just what happened. It's also the story we're never allowed to see, curated by those who hold the papers and the power.
Let's do some deep dive. Because we've explored some of the controversies and the architectural of presidential libraries. It's time to step inside and meet one of the stories that make them unforgettable. So let's take the FDR Library in Hyde Park, for example, the very first official presidential library. Walking through its halls, you can feel Roosevelt's presence, not just in the documents, but in the artifacts. His wheelchair tucked quietly in a corner, letters from citizens seeking help during the Great Depression, and his early drafts of the Social Security Act that forever changed American life.
He was a good one.
Maybe we do a whole deep dive on him. Did you know that his wife, Eleanor, wanted him to be a dictator?
I did not.
He was the only president in American history to be elected 4 times.
I knew that.
And he was the reason why in Congress, both parties put term limits on the president.
Yes, I knew that too. Historians often describe the thrill of discovering something small but monumental, a margin note revealing his personal doubts or memorandum detailing the inner workings of his administration. Contrast that with the Nixon Presidential Library, where the tension between legacy and scandal is palpable. Originally controlled by the Nixon family, the library became a site of both revelation and debate.
Visitors can listen to segments of the infamous White House tapes, experiencing firsthand the conversations that led to Watergate. Archivists recount stories of researchers uncovering hidden correspondence that challenged the public narrative, offering new insight into a presidency long defined by secrecy and controversy.
Even today, Nixon's library serves as a reminder of the delicate dance between transparency and legacy, showing how a library can illuminate history while simultaneously shaping memory. Then there's the Clinton Presidential Library in Little Rock, Arkansas, a modern, tech savvy institution where interactive exhibits allow visitors to explore the economy, healthcare reform, and foreign policy initiatives in a hands-on way.
Yet, amid all these, you know, displays, there is awareness of what is omitted: scandals, partisan battles, and contentious policy decisions are often minimized or contextualized to soften, well, their impact. Archivists tell stories of how even mundane administrative records, memos, emails, and meeting notes can reveal the human side of leadership. Disagreements over policy, moments of friction, or flashes of humor during tense meetings.
These small glimpses remind us that behind the curated exhibits lies a sprawling archive teeming with nuance, complexity, and contradictions. Across these libraries, one theme emerges. They're living institutions, not static monuments. Documents are digitized, exhibits are updated, and interpretations revised as scholars uncover new truths.
Researchers, students, and even casual visitors have opportunities to discover unexpected stories. Whether it's a handwritten plea from a citizen in the midst of economic hardship or a confidential communication that sheds light on a pivotal historical moment. Walking through these presidential libraries, visitors, well, they can feel the interplay between the public persona of a president and the private decisions that shaped history. Each one of these presidential libraries is a portal offering both the grandeur of presidential power and the intimacy of human imperfection, reminding us that history is a collection of choices, both celebrated and contested, that continue to resonate today.
I too went to a presidential library once and asked if they had anything exciting.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, the librarian said, absolutely. Every few years, we rearrange the lies into memoirs.
That was pretty good. That was better than mine, I think.
That was pretty good. But stepping back from the archives and exhibits, it really becomes clear that presidential libraries are more than just repositories of paper and artifacts. They're powerful tools that shape how the public remembers history. And they can even influence perception not only of individual presidents, but of entire eras, subtly framing successes and failures through the documents they highlight and the stories they choose to tell.
Yeah, and presidential libraries, they invite us to consider the delicate line between education and influence. While scholars may analyze primary sources in detail, the general public often experiences history as a curated narrative, guided by the design of exhibits and the emphasis of certain stories, you know, or whatever. But they also reflect broader questions about power and memory. Who gets to decide which records survive, which events are celebrated, and which ones are minimized or just omitted outright?
As we face the digital age, presidential libraries are evolving, experimenting with online archives and interactive exhibits, yet the fundamental challenge remains the same: balancing transparency, legacy, and the public's right to see history in its full complexity. In this way, presidential libraries offer a mirror not just to the leaders they memorialize, but to the society that chooses how and what to remember.
So, as we leave the quiet halls of the presidential libraries, it's worth pausing to consider what we've actually talked about here on this podcast today. It's not just about the presidents themselves, but about the way history is preserved, presented, and remembered. And each library is a story in itself, a careful blend of scholarship, narrative, and sometimes controversy. They show us the triumphs, the failures, the human decisions, and the curated images of leaders who, well, shaped the nation.
And yet, they also remind us that history is never entirely objective. What we see is influenced by choices, by perspective, and by power. Now, when you walk through a presidential library, you're stepping into a space where memory is preserved, but also constructed, a place where the past meets interpretation. The challenge and the opportunity for us as citizens, students, and historians is to engage with these stories critically, to explore what's displayed and what remains hidden, and to remember that the story of leadership is never just one version of events. In the end, presidential libraries are more than buildings filled with papers and exhibits. They're mirrors reflecting the complex, sometimes messy, but always fascinating story of American history itself.
And the scandals can be omitted, right?
Oh, always. Unless they're
uh,
too big and nobody will let them go.
yeah, I mean, I could make some really bad jokes right now. I really could. But I mean, hey, it is what it is. I mean, people are only human. I mean, presidents are only human. What do you say, Kat? We do some facts about presidential libraries.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, not all presidents have libraries, right? Only presidents from Herbert Hoover and onward have official presidential libraries. Presidents before him, like Theodore Roosevelt or Woodrow Wilson, their archives are housed, well, elsewhere.
Private funding is key. While the federal government maintains the libraries once opened, private fundraising is essential to build them, meaning donors can influence design and exhibit priorities.
Hmm. And some presidential libraries include, well, grave sites like Franklin Delano Roosevelt's and Lyndon B. Johnson's. Their libraries also serve as their final resting places, combining memorial with museum.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Digital archives are growing. Modern libraries like those of Clinton and George Bush has extensive digital collections, making documents accessible worldwide.
And presidential libraries also host temporary exhibits. Beyond permanent exhibits, they often host traveling exhibits on art, culture, or historical anniversaries to draw, well, a wider audience.
They sometimes include personal hobbies. Some libraries display a president's personal passions, like George W. Bush's painting hobby or Eisenhower's golf memorabilia.
I did not know Eisenhower was a golfer.
I
I,
I don't understand golf. I don't get it.
golf is, we'll talk offline. I used to love to play it, but I'm horrible at it, so I had to give it up for my
Oh,
for my sanity. So, presidential libraries can also be major tourist attractions, like the Ronald Reagan Library in California. It attracts hundreds of thousands of visitors each year, combining education with tourism.
Libraries sometimes face vandalism or theft, as with all things.
Absolutely.
Rare artifacts have been stolen or even defaced over the decades, of course, highlighting the challenges of preserving history securely, because there's always going to be that guy.
There's always or person,
Yes,
person.
guy, gal, human being. There's always going to be that personality type.
There you go. International attention. Foreign leaders and uh, dignitaries often visit, well, presidential libraries, recognizing them as symbols of U.S. history and diplomacy.
They serve as research centers as well. Beyond public exhibits, the libraries are vital for scholars offering original documents that can lead to groundbreaking research on policy, war, civil rights, and even more. Maybe psychology, who knows?
Yeah. And there you have it. I always thought it was just I knew that it housed their works and everything, but I thought also maybe it was like a collection of books that they liked, or like it sounds to me like it's more of a museum than it is a per se library in the sense that we think about it.
Right, right. Same. I didn't realize it was going to be more like a museum than anything
Yeah,
either.
but I did find this one interesting.
Me too. I think I'm going to go visit one day.
Yeah. Uh, we'll just have to put it on the book.
Road trip list.
We can't just visit one because that lays out the perspective. We got to go visit them all.
Oh, okay. So we need to get a map of the US and start putting pins in it and then figuring out a couple of like, I don't know, RVs or something.
Just get in the car and drive, man.
I mean, for sure, but I think I mean, wow, RVs cost an arm and a leg in gas.
So what we do, those little campers that like sleep one or two people?
Yeah.
You pull one, I pull one, and there you go.
Yeah. Yeah, my kids are still little enough so we'd all fit.
I would probably be the only one sleeping in mine. My wife would be like, "No, I'm not doing that."
Aw, dang.
Uh,
Well, cross country road trip nonetheless.
Absolutely. That's pretty much all I've got.
Me too. If you would like to support this podcast, tell a friend and help get the word out.
If you would like to help us keep the show going, you can do so by taking advantage of some of our sponsors or at Patreon. Either way, the links are in the show notes.
And as always, William and I want to thank you for listening.
Whether you've been with us from day one or just tuned in, thank you.
You can join the Facebook group at Info on the Go
Over there, you can share with us your show ideas.
or ask us a question.
But whatever you're doing, stop and hit that follow button wherever you're listening to this podcast.
You can also email us at wait,
Send
nope,
us a
sorry.
text.
You can send us a text using the link in the show notes or leave a review.
Leaving that review really does help others find us, but if you would like to email Kat and I directly, you can do so at
infoonthegopodcast@gmail.com.
and you can find that link in the show notes as well. Till next time.
Stay curious.
If your stomach's been off lately, like bloating, reflux, or just not feeling right, there's a simpler way to get back on track.
With Professor B's Digestive Aid, which is an all natural blend of pure honey and ancient apitherapy, a herb rooted in Roman tradition. You know how at least they had some things right, right? It's designed to gently support and balance your digestion.
No long ingredient list, no harsh additives, just two powerful, time tested ingredients working together. It's even the same formula used to help cancer patients manage digestive discomfort.
And right now, you can get an exclusive 10% off any product. Just use our code INFOGO at checkout.